Hi everyone, this is Aria. Welcome back. This is part 2 of our rigid body destruction tutorial. And if you were here for part 1, you'll remember that we used MakeHuman app to create a base mesh. Then we used Mixamo.com to download 2 different animations. Then we connected those animations inside of Blender here. After that, we used the Cell Fracture add-on to create cracks in our wall here. And then we used a rigid body simulation to create our dynamics. Alright, so today we're going to be adding 2 more of these walls here to destroy, and I'll just show you a couple tricks on getting them to interact with each other a little better. Then we'll add a wall and a ceiling here, and we'll add a couple of quick textures to our ground and our wall, as well as the outer wall here. We'll just add a quick texture to these as well, nothing fancy. And then once we're done that, we'll add in an HDRI, we'll add in some lighting as well. And to finish off everything, we'll add in camera, add some depth of field, and some motion blur. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so we want to make a couple more copies of this wall. So the first thing we need to do is go to frame 1. So let's just click there to go to frame 1. And we want to make sure that all of our pieces are in separate collections. So let's just click on our main scene collection here. And then we can click this button twice here to add in 2 new collections. And we're just going to quickly rename these to wall 2 pieces. And this one here to wall 3 pieces. Alright, so now we can right click on our wall 1 pieces here and go to select objects to select everything. Next we'll hit Shift D and then we're going to hit Y to lock to the Y axis, and we can just drag our mouse over here and just left click when we're happy with the placement. And so now before we change any of the settings here, what we want to do is put these into their own collections. So while we've got them selected here, let's just open up the wall 1 pieces collection and we can scroll all the way down to the bottom. And now you can see that these ones that are highlighted in blue are these ones here. So we're just going to click and drag this bottom one and drop it into pieces 2. And now we can just click this arrow to close that. Scroll all the way back up here and close that as well. And now we can click away, and if we hit play, we can watch our simulation. And you can see that it is working, but there's a couple issues here. First of all, it looks exactly the same as our first wall here, so we want to change that. And the other issue is if I come back a little bit here, you can see that our wall is getting destroyed long before our character hits it, so we don't want that to happen. So the best way to stop that from happening is just to have them not travel so far. So let's go back to frame 1 here, and we can just select one of the pieces that is active and make sure that we are in the physics properties here. And we want to click here and change this to 0.75, and we can also change the damping to 0.75 as well. And now we want to add this to all of our objects, so we can right click on this collection and select objects, and then we'll go to objects here, rigid body, and we can click copy from active. And then one more time we want to go in there and just recalculate the mass, so click calculate mass and click concrete. Okay, so now if you hit play again, you'll see that it's working a little bit better. There is one that's getting ahead of itself, so what you can do is you can click on that one and type in 0.9 and 0.9 for that as well, and then we just watch the simulation again. And now you can see that our character is the thing that's breaking the wall, so that's good. But we've now created just a second issue where our entire wall is falling. So once again, let's go back to frame 1. Let's click one of the objects here that we want to be passive. Go here and change it from active to passive. So now we can zoom out a little bit here. Hit C on your keyboard and you can use the middle mouse wheel to change your selection size. And if you just click and drag on the pieces that you want to stay in place, just select a few of those, and once you've got them selected, hit escape. And then one more time we'll go up to object here, rigid body, and copy from active. You'll notice this time that we don't need to recalculate the mass because passive objects don't have a mass. Alright, so back to frame 1 and we can hit play again and we can see if everything is working correctly here. And again, if you've just got a couple of these ones here that are going too far and don't want to stay, you can also change these to passive as well. And so now if we hit play, we should be okay. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. Alright, and of course, because we changed this over here, you can now see that it fixed the issue of them being duplicates. Alright, so let's head back to frame 1, and we want to make one more wall, so let's right click on wall pieces 2 and go to select objects. Then we can hold shift, hit D, and then hit Y to lock to that axis, and then just drag this out. And then before we click away one more time, we want to make sure that we bring those pieces into their own collection. So let's open up wall pieces 2 here. We can scroll all the way down to the bottom again. And then we'll just click and drag this one here and drop it into number 3. Let's close this, scroll back up. And now we can close that down there. Now we can click away and we can hit play to test out our scene. And you can see that we're having the same 2 issues here. So let's go back to frame 1. And so we can click one of the active pieces from our second wall here. And let's change the friction to 0.75 as well as here. And then we want to right click on this, select objects here. We can go to object, rigid body, and copy from active. And then object, rigid body, and calculate the mass, and we can click concrete. Alright, and then we just want to select the ones that we want to stay in place. We can change this from active to passive. Hit C on our keyboard and we can just select all the ones that we want to stay. Hit escape and then we can go to object, rigid body, and copy from active. Alright, so let's hit play to test out our simulation here, and it's looking pretty good. There is 1 or 2 here that are going a bit too quick, so let's click this here. We can just change this one to passive, and let's click this one here. We can type in 0.9 and 0.9, and let's play the simulation one more time. And that's looking really good. Alright, so now that you've got that, you can change any of these that you want to an active state as well, or passive, just to make it look a little bit different. And make sure you just test out your simulation to make sure everything is working correctly. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So now that we've got that, we can go into our scene properties here. Let's open up Rigid Body World and we can bake our cache. By the way, if you're having any issues with your character running through the wall before it breaks, you can always change the steps per second to something higher and it'll calculate more steps in between each frame, which will give you a better result. It will slow it down slightly, but not too much. So let's just set ours to 100. And then we can open up the cache settings here, change this to 150 to match the length of our animation, and hit bake. Alright, so that should be a super fast bake, and we can go back to frame 1 now, and we've got our simulation complete. You notice that we didn't change any friction settings with this one here, and the reason why is because we don't have an issue with it going into another wall, and this way you just get a little bit more of a dynamic explosion than you do with these two. So you can see here that this piece is probably going to go through the wall. No, it just stopped. Okay, so if it did, you can go into the physics settings here and add a passive rigid body to any of your walls or ground planes. Alright, so now that we've got our rigid body simulation complete, we can move on to creating the rest of the scene. So let's select our character and we can hit the decimal key just to zoom in so we're centered again here at the world origin. And let's hit Shift A and we're going to add in a new mesh. We'll click plane. And then just hit G to move, X to lock it to that axis, and we'll just bring it over till it's centered on our ground plane here. So now we can hit R to rotate, Y, and then type in 90. Next we can hit S to scale it, Y to lock to that axis, and let's just drag our mouse till it's about the size of our ground plane here. And then click, and finally we can hit S to scale, Z to lock to the Z axis, and just drag it up till it's about the height. Alright, and then click. Next we can click our ground plane here. Hold Shift and hit D to duplicate. Then we're going to hit Z to lock it to that axis, and we can just drag it up till it's about the right height that we need, and then click. Alright, so next we want to add a few basic textures here, so let's just go into our shading tab here, and then we can click the material preview here. Let's hover over the center here, and we can right click and click join to get rid of these extra windows. We won't be needing those. Alright, and then make sure your ceiling is selected here. We can click new, and then we're just going to add a very basic dark material to this here. So just set that all the way to 0, and we can leave that. So next let's click the ground plane here. Let's click new, and for this one we do want to add a concrete texture. So you can either go to textures.com here, and you can select one of these. And if you do have to set up a free account for this site, but just make sure you download at least the albedo here, which is the color. We're going to download the normal as well, and the roughness as a very minimum. Or you can go to cc0textures.com and select one of these here. And you'll see that these come in a zip file, so it will have all your maps inside. So you just need to download that and unzip it. Alright, so once you've got your material there, you can just start dragging in the color here. You can drag in the normal as well and the roughness. Alright, so then we want to hook our color up to the color here, and we're going to hook the color of the roughness to the roughness here, and let's set this to non-color data, and then we can just hit this little arrow here to close that down, and this one as well. And then finally for our normal map here, we're going to hit Shift A, and we can go to search and type in normal, and then go to normal map. Let's connect the color to the color and the normal to the normal. We can set the strength to 0.5, and we'll just set this as well to non-color data. Alright, so now we can click that arrow to close that down, and you can see we do have a very large texture, so we do want to make that smaller. There's a couple ways to do this. The quick and easiest way for this, because it already has a default UV, is you can just go into the UV editor here. We can turn on the material shading, and you can hit A to select everything, hit S to scale, and you can scale it up like this. But today what we'll do is we're going to use the Node Wrangler add-on. Let's just go to Edit, Preferences, click Add-ons here, and then we'll type in Node, and make sure that Node Wrangler is turned on, and this is in Blender as default. Alright, so once you have that, you can select any one of these three here. We're going to hold Control and hit, and now we'll just bring these over here. We can connect the vector up to both of these maps as well, and then if we just click and drag here, we can type in 25. And you can see that it's pretty repetitive looking, so what you can do to quickly get rid of some of it is just go into the UV editing here and click R and type in 90, and then we'll head back to shading, and you can still see that it's very repetitive. There are ways to deal with this, but I'm not going to go into depth in this tutorial. There is a great Blender Guru tutorial. I'll leave the link in the description, and he goes through how to make sure that tileable textures don't look repetitive like this when you scale them. So make sure to check that out. And if you look at my original node setup here, you can see how I utilized that. Alright, so now that we've got that, we can click on our wall here. And I just want to show you one other quick thing that you can do with the Node Wrangler add-on. So instead of dragging the maps in manually, what you can do is if you click on the principled shader here, you can hold Control and Shift and then hit T, and you'll see that it brings up this window here. And you just want to go to somewhere on your computer where you've got your textures. They do need to all be inside of one folder here. Select all the maps that you want to use, and then you can click this here, and you'll see that it kind of sets up everything for us. It already sets these both to non-color data, and we just need to set our strength here. And so now we can click and drag here and set this to 25, and you can see it's still looking a bit weird. So let's just go into our UV editing here, and we'll just hit A to select everything, and we'll hit R90 again to rotate this. Now if we go back to shading, you can see it's looking a little bit more like bricks. They're a little bit skinny, so you can change the size of some of this stuff till it's a bit more to your liking. Alright, so that should be good there. And now we just want to add that to this wall down here as well. So if we just name this one here brick, then we can click on this wall here and click this little down arrow, and if we just find our brick texture here, it'll bring it in. Now one more time, we just want to fix our UV, so let's go into our UV editing here. Make sure you're in edit mode here. Then hit A to select everything, and then we can hit A to select everything here and type in R and then 90. Then click, and the final thing you can do is hit S and just drag your mouse until the bricks are a lot smaller there. Now if we go back to shading here, it's looking a lot better. And you can see it's still looking a little bit weird, so what we want to do is just make a copy of this so we don't change anything from this wall here. So click this button, and you'll get a brick 001. And because this wall is more of a square, we want to make our scale settings more even. So just click, and then just whatever you set these at, just make sure that they are all equal. So I'll set them to 15 there. All right, and then the final thing we want to do is just put a quick and easy texture on our walls here. So let's click New, and then we can just click here and bring this down all the way. Let's just bring our roughness up a little bit here. Then we want to add that texture to all of our pieces. So the quickest way to do that is if we just give ourselves some more space here. Just make sure that this one here is selected, and then right click, select objects, go to object here, and if we go to make links, we can click materials. And you can see that it kind of wrecked our wall here, and the reason for that is because our wall is within this group. So let's hit Control Z. And we can just scroll down until we find it at the bottom here. And then we just want to click and drag it out till it's in our main collection here. And now we shouldn't have that issue, so we can click this again here. Alright, so we'll zoom in and click our textured piece here, and we can scroll back up. Right click and select objects. Then we can go to Object here, Make Links, and click Materials. And now you see that it's working properly. Alright, so we're using Material 2 here, so let's click here. And we can just click this little down arrow and go to Material 2. And now we can close this here, right click on Wall Pieces 2, select Objects, go to Object, Make Links, and click Materials. Then one more time, we'll go over here, click here, go to Material 2, right click on Wall 3 Pieces, select Objects, Object, Make Links, and Materials. Alright, so now that we've got all of our base textures here, let's start to make them look a little bit better. So what we can do is go back to our layout here and click on our render preview here, and you can see that things are starting to look a little bit better. But we do need to start adding some lighting. So what I like to do first is add an HDRI if I'm using one. So let's click on the world properties here, and we can click this little dot and go to environment texture. And then if we click open, you can just find any HDRI that works for you. Unfortunately, this one, I have no clue where I got it from, but you can also go to hdriskies.com or HDRI Haven and find one that works for you, and then click open. And now you'll see that things are looking a little bit better here. And of course things now are a little bit dark, so we're going to add in some more lights. So hit Shift A and we can go down to light and then point, and then we can hit GZ to bring it up, GY to bring it over, and GX to bring it back. Alright, and then we can just go here to change the power to something like 35, and we'll just change the color to a slight blue, just so we're matching the lighting of the HDRI. So now that we've got that, we can make this light flicker. So let's just bring our mouse up here till we see this little plus sign, and we can click and drag to create a second window. Let's click here and go into the graph editor, and you can see that there's no information showing right now. So what we need to do is set a keyframe for this. So let's make sure that we're in the light properties here. Make sure you're on frame 1 as well, and then we can just hit I over top of power here to set a keyframe, and now you can see that we've got some values here that we can work with. So make sure that power is selected. We can give ourselves a little bit more space here. And then if we hit N to bring up our side menu here, we can go into modifiers, click here, and click noise. Alright, so let's hit normalize so that we can see what we're doing here. And if we hit play now, you'll see that really nothing is happening. And the reason why is because our noise isn't strong enough to affect it any more than a few values. So back to frame 1, and we can change our strength to something like 75 or 100 even. Now if you hit play, you can see that there's a lot more flickers. And if you want to change the speed of the flicker, you can just use this here. The lower that you set this to, the faster it will go, and vice versa. So now that we've got our first light here, we can hold Shift and hit D and then hit Y to lock it to the Y axis. Bring this over here, and then we can just slightly change the phase just so it's got a different flicker to it. Then we'll do that again, Shift D, bring it over here, hit Y to make sure it's locked to that axis, and then click, and we can just change the phase a little bit. Let's just move over and we can add one more light. So Shift D, then Y, and then we can just drag this light over to the end here and click, and we'll just change the phase a little bit more. And now you see if we hit play that we've got our flickering lights. Alright, so if you want to, you can add a couple more to the other side. So click these, Shift click and Shift click. Then we can hold Shift D and hit X to lock to the X axis and just drag these over. And then of course you just want to click each one here and just change the phase to something that's different than the original. Alright, so let's hit play, and everything is looking awesome. If that's a bit too much flickering, feel free to change your settings any way that you like. So let's just quickly go to our render settings here, and we can go down to film and unclick transparent, and that way we'll get a bit of a background here for our scene. You may or may not use that, that's just more for the outside here. And let's just click this light, and we're going to bring one more outside, so Shift D, hit Y, and we can just bring this past the wall here, and then we're going to hit GX and just bring it over in front of our window. By the way, now is a good time to save your scene if you haven't done so already. And now that we've got all of our lights here, we can get rid of this window, right click, join area, and click this way. Alright, so now that we've got our scene set up here, we can start working on our camera. So let's just go over here, hit the decimal key to focus in. We can hit Shift A and click camera. And then you just want to go roughly where you think you want your camera to be. And then if you hold Control Alt and hit 0, you can see that your camera will snap to your view. And then if we hit F3 and type in walk, you'll see that we've got this option here, walk fly. Let's click that. And now if I move my mouse, it will orbit. And if I use the arrow keys here, we can go back and forth and side to side. And if you want to go up and down, just use the Q and the E. If the increments are too much for you, you can scroll down on your middle mouse key and then use those, and it won't be as great of an increment. And then once you're happy with your position, you can click, and then we're going to hit I, and we're going to keyframe the location and rotation. Alright, so we can just click the armature here and hit H to hide it, or we can go up here and click this little eye here to hide it. Let's just click our character here. Let's go over to the materials property here, and we can just click X, and we're going to add a new material. And let's just bring the roughness all the way down and the metallic all the way up. Alright, so let's find our camera, which appears to be in this collection here. So let's just click and drag and just click on scene collection so that from now on nothing will go inside our other collections. So click on the camera here. Now that we've got our first keyframe, what we can do is just hit play until our animation is a little bit further ahead. We can go to that position and do the same thing, Control Alt and hit 0, and then F3, enter, and we can just set our camera the way we like it. There, looks good. So let's hit I, and we can set another keyframe, and then we're just going to go all the way up until we've got our keyframes set. Alright, and then we can come out of camera view here. We can just let our animation play till it's all the way near the window here. Let's just get set up here. And then one more time we can hold Control Alt and hit 0, then F3, and we can set our camera. Click, and then make sure to set a keyframe. And let's go to frame 135 here, hit F3 again. And we can just come on out here till we're past the wall. And then click, hit I, set another keyframe, and then we'll just go to the final frame here, F3 one more time. Select that, and we'll just set our camera. Alright, and then one last time we'll hit I to set our keyframe. And now if we go back to frame 1 here, we can hit play and watch our animation. So it's looking really good. Just make sure that your camera is set to linear. So we can just click here and drag to go into the graph editor. Hit normalize, and you can see that my camera is not, so I'm going to right click, switch the interpolation mode from Bezier to linear. Okay, we can get rid of this here. Let's go back to frame 1, and if we hit play, you can see now that our camera is a lot more locked with our animation. If there are a few places that you feel it's a little bit behind, you can go to a certain frame and just hit F3 and just reset a keyframe here, and then set a key. Okay, so now let's give it a bit of depth of field. So make sure you're in the camera settings again, click depth of field here, and you can use a focus object. If you just click this little eyedropper, you can select your object here, but to be honest, I found it easier to just animate the focal distance. So let's open up the viewport display here and click limits. And so now you can see that if we change our focal distance here, that this little X, this little plus goes right where we want it to focus. So we can set a keyframe there, and then we just want to hit play and just make sure that it stays right with our character the entire way. So it's a bit off here, so let's just change that a bit. Set a new keyframe, and once it goes out here, you just want to tweak it until you're happy with it. Okay, so we can bring this a bit forward as well and set a keyframe. Awesome, so let's hit 0 on the numpad again to go into our camera view, and what we can do is change our f-stop to something like 1.8, go back to frame 1, and we can turn off our overlays, and we can watch our animation. Alright, so it's looking great. I use cycles for my render, which I found gave a little bit nicer lighting, but this one works great as well with Eevee, so feel free to use Eevee instead. And if you are using cycles, make sure to click motion blur, and this will give you a lot nicer render, which will help give it a more cinematic look. Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments, and please like and share this video. And if you are not subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. That helps me out a great deal. And next week we're going to be doing a tutorial on the molecular script add-on for Blender. You can already see one of the animations that I posted, and I'm going to try to do a couple more before next week, so stick around for that, and I hope to see you then. Alright, bye!